right, well then let's get this meeting going then, and trustee Satori should join us in just a moment. And so I'm just gonna call the meeting to order. Meeting to call to order, let's have a roll call vote.
Vito Pam, Patty Garbarino, Cindy Johansson,
Here.
Nancy McCarthy,
Present.
Marilyn Nemser,
Here.
Curtis Robinson,
Present.
Jill Sartori.
Joining.
There we go. So let's get everything. Yeah, we just. Okay. And here's Jill.
Hello.
Okay, welcome, Jill. We just did roll call vote, so you're here. Thank you for.
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
All right, hello. And now.
Technical difficulties.
No problem. We waited for you. And now let's have the approval and adoption of the agenda, item 1.03. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of passing this agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I abstain.
Okay, and then one abstention, trustee McCarthy. Okay, and now let's have public comment for items not on the agenda if there are. But wait, yeah, if there are folks in the room. Anyone in public comment? Seeing none, let's move right on. That was quick. Consent agenda, let's approve this in its entirety.
I have a comment.
We have a comment on the consent agenda. Okay, what's your comment?
So I've noticed with the minutes of our meetings that there's a really great summary of our board member reports, some specificity, high level summary. However, for the superintendent's report, there's usually a generic sentence in the minutes that doesn't really reflect the substance of what John has shared. And considering that's kind of core to why we're here, I wanted to request that future minutes be more consistent in how we capture the superintendent's comments in a high-level summary, just as we do for board member reports.
Great, I think that's a great suggestion. Is there any other discussion regarding that question?
If I recall correctly, there was also a point in time where we had suggested that maybe, excuse me, John can actually come up with a summary report so that it's something in writing and it sticks more rather than just hearing it from him.
We had that in a previous discussion.
It was raised.
We came into an agreement on that.
No, we did not come to an agreement.
Do you mean preparing in advance?
Not necessarily, it could be in advance or after, so long as it's more, it sticks more. We know more what it is that John had.
Wouldn't we reflect that in the minutes? Why wouldn't we just reflect that in the minutes?
Okay.
You can write it and put that into the minutes, or it can be dictated and transcribed into the minutes.
That's fine,
Okay.
no problem.
Any other comments or discussions on the consent agenda?
Yes,
Another comment?
I have a really
Yes.
tiny correction on the same minutes, I think the meeting of the 27th was super short, the last one, and it says that we adjourned at 6:56, so I think that's
It was a typo.
probably it was
356.
3:56, yeah. Or something.
So that means you read the entire consent
Yeah.
agenda to get to the last
I
one.
did.
Special.
Actually.
Okay, well, we haven't had a motion yet on the table to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion? As amended, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and heard a motion, is there a second?
A second.
Okay, all those in favor to pass the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it passes unanimously. Now let's move on to Marin County Superintendent of School report. That's Superintendent Carroll.
Thank you. I first want to thank our business team. We got confirmation from the California Department of Ed that our second interim budget report was approved. And that's, I would really hope that happens. That would be sort of shocking if it didn't happen. But the reason I bring it up is as a reminder of the work that's constantly going on when there are other things happening, that there's sort of this the water that we're all swimming in that's happening. So thank you for the accuracy for your team. Bree, if you could pass on our gratitude for their work. Really appreciate that. Great job. We had a meeting with the superintendent's group. We meet monthly, as most of you know. And we had a very productive discussion about a shared response to smartphone use at school across the county. The major takeaway from the superintendents was an understanding and it was to a person, that everyone understands that the research says that smartphones are harmful for students in general. I will be drafting a position statement that I believe will be supported and endorsed by all the superintendents, and I'm hoping that will serve as a foundation for future policy decisions across Marin. Additionally, we'll be developing a resolution for this board to consider, and we'll be working with the board on that to memorialize our position on that topic. This is a really good example of a strong partnership around a specific educational topic and an opportunity for us and our superintendents to take a leadership position on something that's very important. I want to express some appreciation, especially to Jill, for bringing this topic up, and for starting the conversation, especially with the op-ed piece that showed up in the IJ a while ago. I think that brought things to the forefront. So that conversation is happening. There'll be more to come on this topic with our superintendents in partnership with our districts, and more to come for our board coming up in June. I want to talk a minute about our career technical education efforts. It's a very exciting time, and this was just going to be an announcement about how nice it was to have Charlie Goodman host a kickoff event at his facility for Novato's career technical programs. But so much other stuff has been happening with that. We had a great story in the IJ last weekend that just highlighted all the great work that's happening around school to career programs around Marin County. Coincidentally, I got a call from a New York Times reporter that has she found Marin? I'm not exactly sure. One of their video reporters who wanted to do a piece that we think will be forthcoming on the video edition of the New York Times about what's happening with career technical education, mostly around the idea of, and hopefully I frame this the way I want them to say it, that it's not about college or career, but that we're looking at a synthesis of both and making sure that we keep opportunities open for all students. That video reporter was with us today, not me personally, but in Marin County, I think doing video at Redwood High School at Novato, Centerville. So that's something else that's come up. So this is a very important topic, and I'd like to kick it over to Adam. Do you have more to add on this? Were you up for the next thing?
No, that's fine. I was going to add a little bit.
But yeah, please do.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about. So I just wanted to share a little bit more about the CTE Center kickoff that we had last week. So the center will expand high quality career technical education. Probably all read about this in the IJ already, so apologize if I'm repeating the IJ. But the new center expands high quality technical education opportunities for students and bring classes closer to home for many kids in Novato and Northern Marin. The article talked about, and as we discussed that night, a lot of our students who come to the Carolina program actually are coming from Novato, and we see some attrition because of their inability to travel. So we're really excited about this. The first phase is going to be kind of a renovation of a covered structure that's there. The second phase is going to be the expansion to offer more classes. So we'll start with a building and trades construction class, a construction trades class, and then we will move in and also have a car appreciation class, which is one of the reasons why Charlie's been so involved with us on car appreciation and preservation. And then we hope to expand, add plumbing and HVAC, as well as electrical and potentially other car classes who work on automobiles. So we're really excited about it, super happy about our partnership with Novato, our partnership with industry, who is giving us a lot of input on what careers they would like to see us offering and opportunities for our kids in those careers. And so it was just a really great night. Thank you to board members who were able to attend and support, and to John for his remarks. It was really fantastic. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I wanted to mention that I had the pleasure of attending the middle school track and field final meet last Friday at College of Marin, which is always a joyous event. We get to see students out there outside, away from their phones, doing physical activity. And it's very nostalgic for me. First, I get to check in with all these teachers that I know and administrators who are all showing up for this event. And it's double nostalgic because I participated in that same event at College of Marin in 1977 and 1978. So this is a fairly ancient tradition in Marin, and it's so good to see kids having a good time and participating in a healthy athletic competition, something that means so much to all of us. Middle school is sort of the last time where, for a lot of kids, where sports gets very competitive when you get to high school, and to see them all out there, it doesn't matter who they are, all having a good time participating in that competition is great. Walker Creek Ranch, we've had our special education programming visits underway at Walker Creek, and Stacy Tachiki is here to tell us how that has been going.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, I'm Stacy Tachiki. I'm the Director of Special Ed here from the Marin County Office of Ed. Our classrooms, some of our classrooms had the opportunity to go up to Walker Creek yesterday and last Monday. Our students also may have the opportunity to participate in the 5th grade field trip with their school site. Sometimes it's a lot for our students to stay overnight. So we have annually been scheduling a trip for our middle school classes as well as Compass Academy, which is our therapeutic day treatment program. So they went the past couple of weeks. They had a great time. Thank you so much to Walker Creek Ranch and their naturalists and Rowan. They did such a great job at differentiating the science curriculum that they had there, provided visuals for our students to be able to access the information that they were sharing. And we even had a student in a wheelchair who they were driving around in one of their little four-wheelers so that she could get from activity to activity. So they did such a great job and our students had a great time. We had 2 new students at Compass who went. One of them, it was their first day and she had a fabulous time.
Like this every day? Okay. Great. And lastly, I'd like to just report out to the board that I was able to attend the what we were calling the Education Summit in Sacramento. And when we say the word lobbying, we get told by our lobbyists not to say that it's the Educational Summit, where we get to meet with staffers and legislators about a variety of topics. And it was it's easy to go to either DC or Sacramento and like be cynical, but it really did not feel that way. We felt very listened to, and it was very interesting also to participate or to sit and not only participate very actively in committee meetings around education topics and observe that many of our legislators are very young, very shockingly young in some cases, and a lot of them, they come from other worlds, and education is not necessarily the thing that they live and breathe all the time. So part of us being there as county superintendents, it's very helpful to have conversations with them about the potential impact of legislation going forward, and to sit in committee meetings and listen to like some of those conversations was really interesting. And I always come back from Sacramento, and this is great news for democracy, at least for me. I come back a little less cynical. Like, people are really listening, and they do seem genuinely concerned about things. They don't always vote the way we want, but I think there is interest, especially among the people who represent this county. So a successful trip, and I got to meet legislators from all over the state because we team up with other county superintendents and meet with their folks as well. So an interesting trip, and kind of gives me hope for the future. So we'll keep working on all that stuff. Thanks, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent.
I have a couple of questions, just we moved through all the topics and
Do you have a specific comment related to the superintendent remarks? Because we're not gonna have a big discussion.
I did not, I have heard that after all the work that was done on children not having telephones in school, that it didn't improve the results in terms of the academic results. Is that something that has been considered in context of rolling out these programs here?
To try to respond really briefly, I think you're probably referring to a New York Times article that was republished in the IJ that was specifically about test scores not having gone up as a result in year 1, which I think was during the pandemic. So I think the data on test scores isn't super clear. The data on other things will be, or already is. So that's something that we will be keeping an eye on for sure. But I don't think we're going after the test score issue going after the cell phone issue because of test scores per se.
The other question that I had was about the program for the career to school to career program. That go around construction trades and automotive. When I was in high school, that used to be in New York State called BOCES, and it was, I thought, dimly viewed at some point as taking children into some sort of a program. It seems as if that has now been eliminated in terms of getting rid of those. It was shop. I mean, it used to be high schools had shop programs. Were there ever shop programs in Marin County?
Yes.
There were.
And what, and why were they eliminated and why did they appear to be coming back?
This could be a bigger topic, but basically around 1978, Prop 13, a lot of those programs got cut. And we're finding ways to bring them back. And the world has changed a lot in terms of what those jobs are. So it's not just shop, college, or career.
I actually thought they were cut, not because of money, but because of other reasons.
Okay, any other comments? And we can move on to item 4.02. And that is the Ross Valley Charter School Quarterly Oversight Report. Assistant Superintendent Lee Brown, thank you for this presentation.
Hello, good afternoon. This actually isn't much of a presentation, it's just an update. We do have oversight responsibilities over Ross Valley Charter, and we received their second interim, and we had no findings after that second interim. Their enrollment is remaining steady, and so is no longer a concern as we had when it was dipping. And then the last thing I would remind you is that they will be bringing their renewal to us in the fall. And so I think that's the most important thing. We'll be putting together an ad hoc committee, and that will be an incredibly deep dive into the Ross Valley Charter as we review their renewal recommendations. Coming soon.
Yes. And the ad hoc committee means a couple members of the board.
That is true.
And so members who might be want to be interested in this ad hoc committee, please let me know. So
I'm interested.
Okay. Anyone else? I was just throwing it out there for thought.
Is there any update now? I mean, are they afloat? Is everything being managed?
Yes, we agreed with their positive certification at second interim. I had no comments for them.
They were just here a meeting or two ago.
Yeah, they did their annual presentation. They're required by code to do an annual presentation to us, and they just recently completed that.
Are they the only charter school in Marin County?
There are two charter schools in Marin County. There's the Ross Valley Charter that is actually a state approved charter that we are the designated authorizers by the state. And then there's Novato Charter School that is authorized by Novato.
So we don't have anything to do with oversight of that school?
No, the way charter oversight works, Novato is in charge of their oversight. And so as part of our AB 1200 oversight, we just note that it is required of Novato to do the oversight for Novato Charter.
So if Nancy's going to be part of the ad hoc, we might need to give you a lot of background on how we became in charge of the Ross Valley Charter.
I read about that.
Yes, a lot of detail that.
I read about the problems, the issues in all detail.
Or just the
Sure.
fact that we're overseeing them when we voted no to have that charter approved.
Exactly, I read that at all.
Perfect. All right, any other questions for Bree?
I'd be happy to join the committee too.
Okay, and we have two wonderful volunteer
Can I
trustees.
just make one note? We do, and I think I'm repeating myself, but just so you remember, we meet with, well, it's a phone call with their executive director weekly. We just had a phone call with her today. There were some financial concerns, especially over the last few years. It's generally stabilized, and the student enrollment has been consistent for the last 3-4 years. So less anxiety around that. Their executive director is leaving. She'll retire at the end of June. They have hired a new director who you will meet sometime soon.
And we won't take action until we receive that documentation. So you'll have to stay tuned for when that will all start to organize.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other comments? Great questions. What about item 4.03, the monthly budget breakdown? Assistant Superintendent Rita. Back to the vote.
Well, again. So we've, I think at the beginning of this year, we said we all wanted to learn a little bit more about the budget, and one of the things we did was start doing a monthly budget breakdown. So far, we've gone over LCFF and federal revenues, and so we are up to state revenues. And then next time we have a budget breakdown, which we only usually have them when we don't have budget documentation, so we won't have one in the month of June because we'll be doing budgets in June. But we will get to that local at some point in time. But I just wanted, again, there's 4 primary sources of revenue for all school districts. For Marin County specifically, or the Office of Ed, we have about approximately, I think it's 24%, I can't read that small, but it's about 24% of our budget is state revenues. That equates to about $17.5 million of our total overall revenues comes from state sources. So just to clarify the difference between state and LCFF, again, LCFF comes from the calculator. And so state is going to be kind of little categorical grants. The bulk of state comes from special ed because special ed is not included within the LCFF calculator. And so the bulk of that 17.5 million is going to come from special ed, but there's a lot of other state grants and funding sources that you may have heard of. I picked a few just to kind of walk through some samples. I think lottery is one of the most common things that most people are aware of, that if you buy a lottery ticket, a very, very small percentage of that lottery ticket goes to schools. But in Marin, we are a heavily basic aid county, and most of our districts are heavily basic aid, which means we're funded by property taxes, but state funding doesn't come from property taxes. And so it's incredibly important for all districts, including the county office, to maintain their ADA and to very carefully document their average daily attendance, because almost all state funding is based off of some form of either ADA or enrollment. So maintaining the, even though, you know, you might, well, you won't, but districts might feel less compulsion to really monitor their ADA if they're heavily basic aid because their ADA doesn't factor in. It is important to factor your ADA, which is why it's still required of all districts, because all of these funding sources from the state pretty much come from ADA. So just for a quick example, lottery. Lottery has 2 different funding sources. One that's pretty much open, it's called non-Prop 20. It should be called Prop 37 because that's what created lottery many moons ago. But it's unrestricted, which means it can be used for any educational purpose. And then there's the secondary pot of lottery referred to as the Prop 20 money, and that is restricted only to be used for like textbooks, and in this day and age, you know, digital textbooks or you know, various educational materials. But both of those are based on per ADA. There's a very specific formula that creates those. And so again, it's important for all districts to maintain that ADA. I think like the state gives us like a factor. It's approximately $190 per student for the non-Prop 20 ADA, and you receive approximately $82 per student for Prop 20 ADA. Those types of tiny categorical pots are what the whole system used to. We had a lot of questions about LCFF and how LCFF came about. California used to be based almost predominantly on just a ton, hundreds of different little pots of money. And at one point in time, the state said, hey, listen, we're getting crazy. We have so many pots of little categorical monies. And that's when the LCFF calculator came to be. And they tried to put all of those pots of money into one calculation system so that districts could have a more consistent way of monitoring their funds. But still, even after LCFF, there are just many little tiny pots of money that remain. And they're usually very targeted, such as textbooks or mandated costs. Mandated cost is another grant or portion that we receive from the state based on, it used to be called, the mandated costs are actually things that are required by law. So like negotiations is required by law. You know, posting different things outside your building is required by law. And so the state just decided to make it one big block grant and you get just kind of a flat amount per ADA because they didn't want people having to turn in little timesheets for every little piece of it. I actually appreciate it because you know, way more efficient. Unfortunately, the state cut the funds for it, so it's a very smooth time. Other state grants that we have in our budget, I just kind of grouped them by major categories. So in alternative ed, we receive a community schools grant. We receive money for educator effectiveness. That actually kind of goes into ed services a bit too, because ed services uses some of that educator effectiveness money to provide trainings to districts and teachers throughout the county. Ed services also, and many of these are across, I kind of just general category because we have foster and homeless youth, which our HSS program also participates in. So, and then quite a bit of child development money, mental health money, infant programs, and like we were talking earlier, CTE, that's all comes from various forms of state funding. So within our own budget, there are many different varieties, but that is why we're here today, because I want to make sure that you feel that you can read our budget, because our budget's coming up next month. And so reading the SACS forms is part of what we do here at the county office. And so you're going to be receiving our SACS forms next month. Where we'll see two sets. We'll see our preliminary at the first June meeting, and we'll see our final at the second June meeting. And this is the standard SACS form right here. It's Form 01. And I just want to draw your attention to, and this will be posted on the web. I think it already is posted on the web. So if you're curious, you can come back and use this as a reference sheet. But I just kind of wanted to draw attention to where you can find other state, I don't know why they call it other state, but it's state revenue. And you can see that I think we have about 17.5, or I guess about 17.7. Oh, there it goes. Projected year totals. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing here because it's so darn far away. So we're looking at the fourth column, which is your projected year totals, which was our second interim. And so according to second interim, we had about $17.5 million in our state funds. It had dipped a bit from what we had projected at budget. But right now we're remaining fairly steady throughout the year. Things can ebb and flow. You know, sometimes we expect to get grants at the beginning of the year and maybe the state doesn't receive all the funding that they want, so it cuts a little bit, or maybe for some reason our eligibility criteria changes and so that reduces a little bit. But especially when it comes to special ed monies, big fluctuations can happen because that is the bulk of our money. So if there's ever any type of funds coming in for special ed and some sort of circumstance changes, whether the funding rate, that can have a big potential swing for this particular pot of money. Just to go in, to continue on the SACS, I'm not going to go into this completely, but if you wanted to look at the second interim packet, I provided some information about where you could find the state section in the second interim portion of the budget, and we'll be going into this in detail when we look at the budget next month. But I'm not going to drone on about that because it can get kind of dry. But I am happy to sit with anybody who wants a lesson on this because I think this is the best part of the job. So I'm going to go hard on that.
They volunteers.
But for those of you that are feeling like numbers are a little bit overwhelming, I would like to always draw your attention to the final section of the SACS document. It's called the SACS Criterion and Standards Review. It's really kind of the SACS software is required to be used by the state. And so that's why I continue to bring it to you because it is our required software. We're required to use it. And so we spend a lot of time populating the information here. And the Criterion and Standards Review, which is the final form in the packet, really kind of takes the numbers and turns it into reality. It says, okay, is this within the normal? So it takes a particular thing, such as our state revenues, which is the bottom half of this page right here. And it says, okay, this is what it was at first interim. Here's where it is at second interim. Did we change within a normal range? And sometimes it'll say yes, and we'll be good. And sometimes it'll say no. And if we do have a yes that it's outside the normal range, then we need to provide an explanation. So if you want to say, hey, are we within normal? This would be the place to go to say, hey, our budget's normal, or hey, our budget's outside of normal. So right now you can see that all of our state revenues are within the normal range because yes would have indicated that it's outside the normal range. And we have no's for all of this. So we're all within all the changes. They weren't material enough to say, oh, hey, pay attention to this. There's a change outside the normal range. So right now in the state revenues, they're all no's, which is a positive thing.
What is the yes at the top right?
So that's our federal. And there was one that was outside the normal range for federal at second interim. And I can't quite read my own handwriting, but there's an explanation in there. It's a little too small for me to read from right here. I need glasses, but there is an explanation on there. And that's what I'm saying is this is a great place to go. If you want that, if you're looking at all those numbers and you're feeling overwhelmed by looking at all those numbers, go to the criterion standards, because the criterion standards will tell you when things are outside normal and when things are normal. And so you can target and look at that thing and say, hey, this is normal or this is not normal. And if that explanation isn't enough for you, you can come to me and we can give you a more detailed explanation.
Okay, any questions from the
I
board
have
members?
questions.
Trustee McCarthy.
On the page that refers to all other programs that include but are not limited to Medi-Cal billing, what does that refer to? What is a Medi-Cal billing?
So we actually, we have providers on staff and districts have providers on staff that are, let's say, like we pick an OT, for example. So that person is providing services to students. I'm sorry, occupational therapist for those of you. And that person, we can actually bill Medi-Cal for their time with students with parent permission. And so there's multiple, we're always trying to find ways to bring revenue into the school system, and Medi-Cal billing is something that schools are allowed to do with people. So
What happens if somebody's not on Med? What happens if it's not a Medi-Cal recipient?
Did you turn your mic on, please?
the question is what happens if it's not a Medi-Cal recipient? And so we actually have private insurance billing that we're allowed to do as well. So there's multiple forms of billing that we can do for anyone who's a provider. Basically, if they can put a shingle out on the street somewhere and provide a service, we're actually allowed to bill for that person.
That's for psychologists or psychiatrists as well.
Mhm.
So then you're able to bill, and then does the recipient say that they are in private insurance? What happens if there's a copay for mental health? Do they then have to pay a copay?
No, there's not a copay for that. I'm not the expert on the program. All I do is review the overall revenues for it, but it is run through one of the departments here and
Yeah, I'd like to
the
know more
county.
about that, because I didn't think that for IEPs, et cetera, for any kind of special education assistance, that a taxpayer, whether they be on Medi-Cal or in private insurance, would be required to pay affirmatively for a public school to provide that service.
There's no cost to the student. We're billing the state for things that a regular provider would be able to bill for, since we're
But
providing.
that's not the state. If you're doing it for private insurance, most people have co-pays for mental health, et cetera, could be 40%. So if you're billing a person's private insurance, then they may have to pay a portion of what you're billing.
So there's special programs for
Or it can be
schools.
waived, or it can be waived.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to find out.
No, there's special programs for schools. There's eligibility, there's particular payment scales, and I'm not the right person to give you the full details about it, but there is no cost to students.
Who is that person?
I could have Dr. Miller from our HSS department. She oversees the Medi-Cal billing and the private insurance billing, what's called the fee schedule.
And so with the special education programs, I know that there are many times litigation over IEPs or parents that are feeling that their child is not getting the right care. How is that paid for? If there's attorney's fees, et cetera, or mediations or whatever you wind up doing, or sending somebody out of state, where does the money come from to pay for that? Is that something like an ABAG type litigation fund that everybody does it, or is that something that actually comes out of these state funds and grants?
Well, ultimately, every school district is responsible for their own students. So even though MCOE is providing special education students for students in Marin County, ultimately that the responsibility goes back to the individual districts. And depending on the type of litigation, that might be covered by insurance, or the district sometimes has to pay settlements out of pocket.
So that has nothing to do, MCOE is not ever involved in that litigation?
I'm not gonna say that MCOE is not ever involved, because it would depend on who, that's being brought to, but,
But that would be the districts that would be dealing with
but
that.
ultimately districts are responsible for their own students, and technically MCOE doesn't have students outside of MCS and the alternative is.
Right, but you would then be responsible for those schools. MCOE would be responsible for the communities. If that were to be an issue.
I am not the right person to ask the question about litigation, but I'm sure Danielle maybe or somebody else could provide you with more information about that.
I was thinking to get that after the meeting. Finally, I have a question about the loss of students. I keep hearing now that there is dwindling students. So when you're talking about ADA, this is affecting Texas, a variety of different states. Has there been a decline in Marin County, or is there one expected with regard to your ADA numbers?
There has been a decline in Marin, but it hasn't been significant at this point in time, except for in Novato. Novato has seen a significant decline in students, and it's part of why they're having to do some restructuring. MCOE doesn't have a traditional school base, and so our ADA fluctuates more than other districts would, but it's because we're incredibly tiny. I think where are we at right now, maybe 55 enrollment. We have a very small enrollment of close to 55 or 60 enrollment overall, so 1 or 2 students leaving is a lot higher percentage, overall than it would be if they were leaving at a larger school district. But yes, you're not wrong. ADA is reducing all over the country, not significantly in Marin, though we have seen declines in certain areas in Marin.
Thank you.
Great, there's still more questions for Marilyn.
Hi, this is, I think, a semantics question. So state grants, my understanding of a grant is something you have to ask for it. So does that mean for everything on this paper, on this thing under state grants, that staff has to apply and explain and justify why we need the money? Or is there money in these categories that just comes to us that?
No, that's a great question. I'm gonna go back to this one page that I was talking about with the SACS form and why they call it other state revenues, because it's a grouping of a bunch of different types of funds. It's not just grants, it's potentially apportionments or allocations, or there's a bunch of different words that, but you're not wrong. A grant is something that needs to be applied for. But that is not just what's included in the state funding that I'm talking about. That's the other state revenue, or I think I entitled this state revenues because of that, because grants are a specific subset of this amount.
Right, any further questions for Bree? Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. Because it surely turned out that way. Okay, now 4.04 declaration of need for fully qualified educators, Assistant Superintendent Janelle Campbell.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Each year, this is all it's. I turned it off, sorry. Gotcha, thanks. Each year, the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing requires the county offices of education to submit a declaration of need for fully credentialed teachers. This is a certification that the MCBE is making reasonable effort to recruit fully prepared teachers for assignments and programs operated by the MCBE. The declaration lists a conservative estimate of the number of teachers we may need to employ on an emergency basis or with an intern credential. While we have never reached this number, there may be a need to hire teachers who are working towards their preliminary credential or an authorization to serve English learners. This item is brought forward today as a public announcement as required by the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Are there any questions I can answer?
Why are you making the public announcement? I don't understand sort of the need for that.
Yeah, it's part of the requirement for the declaration of need that as a county office, the county superintendent of schools is required to make a public announcement. And so we're doing that here.
And so then what happens? What happens after this public announcement?
We file the declaration with the commission.
And what do they do?
They would hold that, it's our documentation that we are doing everything required to employ fully credentialed teachers.
And what happens if you don't file that?
Well, it would come down to if we are unable to hire teachers that are fully credentialed, there could be an issue with our APA as we are looking at all of our teacher data in the fall census in October.
And so if you get to the point where you can't find fully credentialed teachers, are you allowed to hire non-credentialed teachers?
There are limits to what we can do, so I can give you an example. So right now we are currently recruiting for 2 teachers to serve our deaf and hard of hearing population. This is the hardest to fill position across the state, and we need 2 of those. There is an amazing intern program that is available, and sometimes we're able to find some really great teachers who already have credentials and experience, but not in this area, and they're interested in going into it, and so they enroll in the program, and we're able to hire them on that intern program and identify very specific mentors to support them as they're in their intern program. So that's a current example of what we may have.
And so once you get this declaration in and you indicated that you've tried, if you have somebody else who doesn't necessarily fit the bill, then you will be potentially given an opportunity to have that person brought in under certain circumstances.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Janelle. Any other questions? All right, okay, seeing now, let's move on to 4.05 trauma-informed practices. This is our 3rd assistant superintendent today, Lisa Miller.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this brief presentation. And Katie is going to join me near the end of it to talk specifically about what strategies are used in alternate education programs. So what I'm going to cover with this presentation is to just briefly describe really kind of the theoretical or conceptual framework that is based upon research of creating a trauma-informed school, classroom, and or trauma-informed care. I'm in charge of the slide deck. Thanks. So from a conceptual framework, what this is really founded on is the research that shows that trauma specifically are experiences that produce enduring emotional pain and distress that can impact life outcomes. And the impact of this varies depending on a lot of factors for each individual. But nonetheless, the more trauma you have, the more likely it's going to impact you and have those enduring effects. It's a recognition that prior trauma can impact your development, behavior, relationships, health, education, and success, and other things. So the earlier that you have traumatic experiences, the more likely it's going to impact these areas of development. This framework, the conceptual framework, trauma-informed care, really basically just shifts from blaming a student or a youth of, gosh, what is wrong with you, when you're maybe seeing some externalizing behaviors or they're engaging with you in what might seem maladaptive, to acknowledging that the youth has had prior traumatic experiences. And so it's more about what have you endured? What has happened? And thereby we adopt strategies that don't further the trauma, and instead we honor the students' strengths and empower the students to be resilient despite the traumatic experiences that they've had. So that is a real kind of simplified way to go about this. I just want you to know it's much more complex, but for the purposes of this presentation, it's trying to help orient to when you have traumatic experiences, they can influence development, and we as adults can try to ameliorate the impact of those traumatic experiences by how we interact with you.
Is this something that's new science or new information? Or is this something you're telling us about that has existed for a long time?
This has existed for quite a long time.
And so why are you speaking to us about it now?
This came up at a prior board meeting when we were discussing whether or not to add a student member to the board and participate in the board meetings. And I had put forward, should we move in that direction, it may be important for the adults in the space, meaning all of us, to have some level of background and understanding about trauma-informed care. Because a lot of the students that we serve at Marin's Community School have had traumatic experiences. And I'm not saying whether that's only in the home or in their community, but also in schools by adults not understanding them or being pushed out, or not helping them find opportunities for success. So I brought this forward as something that it would be good for all adults to be aware of when we're working with youth, and especially our youth at Marin's Community School. And I want to just throw in a quick caveat. That doesn't mean these youth aren't capable, aren't resilient. They're not fragile. They're actually really incredible. So I don't want this presentation to be taken interpreted as they're not capable. They're quite capable, and we can create the environments to really help them succeed. So that's a little bit of how we got here.
And when you do this, is this done only through the special education program, or is this done for regular students that are in the community school?
Yeah, this is not my presentation. Our presentation has nothing to do with special education. However, this is applicable really to all youth. There are youth who are eligible for special education that have certainly had traumatic experiences, and there are youth who are not special ed eligible and have had traumatic experiences.
And so this is something that is presented and taught to all of the teachers, not just special education professionals. So all of the teachers in the schools are sort of trained in how to deal with students who've had trauma.
I can only speak to our school as yes, our staff are trained in this.
Okay.
So some examples of trauma, and a term that's often out there is adverse childhood experiences. You may hear it as ACEs. These include poverty, exposure to domestic violence, neglect, different forms of abuse, discrimination, disrupted or dysfunctional family systems, exposure to community violence, unstable housing, and there's plenty more. And then in examples of trauma that may have happened in school, and by the way, these are not exhaustive lists, in the school environment, bullying, adult misunderstandings or misinterpretations of student behavior and student communication, absence of caring relationships, and again, discrimination. So these are examples of what might result in a traumatic experience for youth. So how does that trauma show up in youth? These are some of the signs that we see, and that's been proven in research. So academically, I'm not going to read all of them, but some examples are some students just really struggle with memory and are easily distracted. They might have apathy toward their academics. They don't see the value in that or what their academic success might allow for them in their future. And they may actually become school refusal or truant and not attend school. And not because they're trying to maybe intentionally sabotage, but they're not aware of how their prior trauma might be informing these decisions or these behaviors. Again, this is why it's an opportunity for adults to try to interrupt that and support them so they can reach success. Ways we see it in behavior, you'll see the fight or flight, aggression, risk-taking, sexualized behaviors. Emotionally, we see mood swings, disengagement. You also will see maybe an atypical reaction to something that you would have predicted would have somewhat of a calm reaction. Physically, lots of difficulty sleeping, fatigue, and low investment in their overall health. And so what we know too about this is that anytime that we engage with youth that have had prior traumatic experiences that has shaped or informed their development, if we engage with them in a way that maybe isn't trauma informed, we may then be, intentionally or unintentionally reactivating prior trauma. So it's important for us to be aware of that. It may not be our intent to activate prior trauma, but that's why we want to understand trauma-informed care so that when we do engage with youth, we're using effective strategies to try to prevent us from doing that.
How do you get informed?
Training, education, yeah. So here's some practical strategies. And again, I am really doing a 5,000-foot view of what something that could be, a very long course in college. So some practical strategies. We want to create safe, culturally responsive, and predictable learning environments. Unpredictability can be activating to prior trauma. So the more they can alleviate the anxiety of unpredictableness, that can lower their activated amygdala and allow them to be more present for learning. We want to build trusting relationships. We want them to know they can count on us and that we will be predictable for them. We want to see their strengths and not view them only through their gaps of opportunity. So employing the strength-based mindset. Be inclusive, and we want to empower the students to have choice and voice. The goal of using trauma-informed care practices is not for us to take over their lives. It's for us to empower them through their strengths by creating that safe environment for them. A few more strategies. For many youth that do have a lot of ACEs, it may not come naturally for them to learn social emotional skills, and they may need and benefit from explicit instruction in this area. So that can include self-awareness, relationship skills, frustration management, how to make good decisions, responsible decisions, and sometimes even self-care needs to be explicitly taught. We want to maintain those high expectations with support and encouragement. Again, this is not about youth who aren't capable. They just haven't been given the right circumstances to show how capable they are. We, as the adults, want to model emotional regulation, and then we want to refrain from activating that prior trauma. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie to share a little bit about what this looks like in our alternative education settings.
Just one comment. So thank you for doing all of this. Poverty, to me, that's such a it's such a Eurocentric statement, because we know a lot of people in other countries that are very impoverished, but we wouldn't say that they're more traumatized than people who are wealthy. There's a lot of wealthy people who raise kids that are very traumatized. So I just think putting that label on poverty as a risk factor, I would just comment that I'm not so sure about that.
Okay, well, I would say research shows the lower economic status that you have, the less, the more challenges you have academically in the school setting, I would speak to. Poverty, none of those really stand alone. I wouldn't say it's all through poverty or it's all through discrimination. It can be the combination of the experiences too.
Hi, me again. Just the metaphor for this, right? The metaphor for trauma is the paper tiger, because a student can have a reaction to something that they perceive as a real tiger, but it's actually just a paper tiger. So I could say, hey, Darvin, what about, and Darvin could suddenly say, like, the last time I encountered a white lady with power, this happened to me, and so my amygdala is going to react in this particular kind of way. So the systems you set up at a school really help ameliorate that. So for example, students get to create norms for behavior, and then they're consistent in every classroom so that there's predictability. I know when I go into math, I'm going to get my binder and I'm going to sit down. So they don't go in and they don't know what to expect, because predictability is one way to soothe the amygdala. We also focus on sort of like across the board, what we call tier 1 strategies, or sort of base level strategies for all students. So it's predictability, it's building in breaks, building in movement, building in opportunities. If you feel agitated, you could ask for a break, you could go for a walk with one of our learning coaches. So there's ways to settle down and get back into the classroom to energize yourself. So we have our learning coaches that you've heard a lot about. And then we also have competency learning instead of seat time. So a lot of alt-ed schools, you get credit for sitting in a seat. In our program, you get credit for showing learning. And that can be like, today's not your day to sit in math class, and so you're gonna take this break, but we're gonna catch you up in your academic workshop so that you're still on track to graduate without having had that exact seat time. We also rely on restorative practices, as you know. If there's something goes wrong, we'll restore it, we'll get back to our community norms. There's always consequences, you know, to every action, there's always a consequence, but we're not gonna then say, you don't belong here, you're bad, we're gonna say, like Lisa pointed out, what happened, right? And then we also have a lot of our resources dedicated to healing. We have our family empowerment specialists this year. Because of the grant, we have 2.5 mental health providers. We have our new beautiful wellness center that you all helped us build. And then I wanted to highlight one particular program we have, which is called our CBITS, or Cognitive Behavioral Intervention for Trauma in Schools. So, excuse me, we take a group of students who have experienced a lot of trauma or whose trauma is affecting their success at school. And they have it's a 10-week cycle, a 10-week program where it's evidence-based. They learn coping and relaxation strategies, problem solving, emotional regulation. We work on all of those soft skills all the time and with every student, but these kids get it more intensively because they need it more intensively. And the impact, they decrease in anxiety and stress. You can read it there yourself. But while I'm here, I'm going to plug 3 sources for you. One is Jamie Redford, a local movie maker, made a movie called Resilience. And it came out of the work, so okay, I'll go back even one more space. Nadine Burke-Harris, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who worked in the Bayview, Hunters Point area of San Francisco, did research on ACEs and discovered of those 10 ACEs, if you have 4 of them, not only does it affect your behavior, but you actually have a high rate of cardiac disease, right? So there's all sorts of research about those ACEs and how they can affect you. There are antidotes to that. And building resilience is one of them. And so Jamie Redford made this really great movie called Resilience. I highly recommend that. You can get it on Netflix. But then from that research, he found this school in Western Washington, and he made a whole movie about this program up there, and it's called Paper Tiger. I recommend those 2. Nadine Burke-Harris's book is also awesome, The Deepest Well, if you need more information.
Who wrote Paper Tiger?
It's a movie also by James Redford. And we're on first name basis.
And Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris was our first female Surgeon General in California.
Black female.
And so where do you do these CBITS programs? I mean,
That
take kids out of the class or?
Yes, yeah, they come out
Are you
of
done in school? So they're like, you have a time period where you take them out and you do this?
Yes, once a week, they meet the mental health provider and they have a room and they conduct a group.
And these are children from 5th grade, 4th grade,
At middle school, so it's 7th through 12th grade.
so they can be of any age and you have them all grouped together in 10?
Well, we strategically group them, right? We're not gonna take everybody all at once, so it is a strategically created group.
And when you do that, what is sort of the impact of sort of what I think they call it push-pull, when you take the children out of the class to have a special program? How do you protect them from being sort of either bullied or questioned or treated poorly for having to go to that room and do that program?
Yeah, they actually really are super excited to go, and they're like, wait, don't we have CBITS? We have a bunch of groups. There's so many groups. If you got ostracized for being in a group or getting a one-to-one appointment, everybody would be ostracized. So it doesn't happen.
And that's what school?
We're in this community school.
Just the community school?
Yeah.
Is this something that happens at the district schools?
CBITS groups, yes.
Yeah, this was available to some of our school districts because of the grant that we were awarded for it. So yes, a couple of our districts also participated in this.
But that was only available because of the grant, otherwise you would not have been able to do this?
That's correct.
But it's a nationwide program, it's something that's an accepted psychological matter to handle students.
I mean, CBT everything right now, so that's it for. Okay, any more questions? That was a wonderful presentation, and Trustee McCarthy, thank you for all the questions.
And I'd like to get these slides, if you don't mind.
Happy to get those to you.
Okay, so moving right on. Action items 501, first reading policy, board policy number 5131.08. This is the mobile communication devices. Assistant Dr. Lisa Miller once again.
Yeah, I don't have a presentation or anything prepared for this, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
This is an action item. A little more background.
Yeah, so a new law was put in place that requires all public schools to adopt a student use cell phone board policy. So this year, we have been working on that with member Bill Centauri, and definitely talked about what does this look like for all our alternative education programs. So to be clear, this board policy is only for that program, not for the broader schools in Marin. So in reviewing what other districts have put forward, what the state has put forward as kind of template language for a board policy, we individualize that for the uniqueness of Marin's community school. And so you will see in this board policy, it is consistent actually with a practice that they began rolling out about 2 years ago, which is cell phones cannot be used in classes. The cell phones are actually put in a separate box during the class time so that the students cannot access them at all. But they do access them at lunchtime. So we do feel there is right now some need to continue to offer access to cell phones for our youth at Marin's Community School. And so this board policy specifically represents our program.
This is a hot topic. Any questions or discussion? This is a vote.
So this is the first
Oh, the
reading.
first reading,
Yeah.
oh. We're just thinking. Well, we can adopt.
You're moving to,
You need to take action to move it to second reading, or you can waive second reading if there's interest in that.
Want to see it next month? It is a good topic with the superintendent's stuff that he's doing now. Let's go for the first reading and bring it back in case there's some new understanding of this. Do we have a motion?
I agree. Prove it and go move to a second reading.
Okay. Since is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, and then all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, unanimously passes the first go around. Okay, now item, let's see best. Here we have 502, first reading board policy for 20.4, authorization of county charter schools. This is our charter school policy.
Policies, yeah, so I have 5 policies before you today for first read, and all of these focus on authorization and oversight of this board related to charters. And I think I just want to start here with just talking really quickly about the board's authority in this space. And so I think all of you know that you hold the authority to authorize charters, either those that come before you for acceptance or those that come before you under appeal. As part of that, you need to conduct an independent evaluation to look at the effectiveness of that charter and using Ed Code criteria, which is policies are modeled after. And part of that independent evaluation, I think Bree touched on this already. This board historically has assigned an ad hoc committee to that, where 2 board members sit on that. The only thing I would add from the earlier discussion is that it goes to the board president, and then the board president makes a recommendation that does need to be approved by the board. And that's now in your bylaws. So that will be coming in the fall when that charter petition does come before the board. And then lastly, I think it's also a key component to this is the MOU. So it can be a provisional approval which everything is memorialized in the MOU, creates some accountability and understanding of who's playing what role within the charter. So now that we know the authority of the board, I want to just quickly walk you through these policies. First, I want you to kind of think about this. Well, we have two current board policies on the books right now, which is authorization of county charter schools and appeal of district decisions related to charter schools. When we got into that to look at updates to code, we realized that we really needed to create what I like to think of as a board policy or charter board policy sandwich. So this is the top layer, the bread, if you will, the authorization of county charter schools. But we're pulling out and putting some meat in there. We're taking the oversight, which is currently in the authorization, making it its own standalone policy, revocation, making it its own standalone policy so it's clear to the reader, and then renewal. And then the last piece of that sandwich, the last piece of bread, is another existing policy, which is the appeal of district decisions. And we've pulled everything out of that related to renewal, revocation, and oversight and put it into those standalone policies. So just to take you on a quick tour of this, because I know it's a lot of information and there are 5 policies there. The first policy on that, the bread on the top there, is just updated. When we got into the lab to look at this, we realized there's only one key area of ed code that's changed, and that's material revision. So material revision under code is if the charter proposes to expand operations at one site or grade level, it's considered a material revision, which we need to come in front of this board. We did not have that in the current policy, so it's now included in this updated policy. And as I mentioned earlier, we pulled out all the supervision, renewal, and revocation and created stand-ups. The first is oversight, which is a new policy. And you'll notice there that it just talks about your authority to just monitor this at the academic level, the fiscal level. And you saw this actually with Breed in your presentation earlier today. So we now have this memorialized in policy, so it's clear. The other is the revocation piece. It provides a structured due process related to this. And then it also identifies the appeal process. As you know, and this is your fun fact for the day, anyone can appeal a decision of this board and it would go to the state. So if the charter came before this board, this board says no, it goes to the state board of ed, unless the CCE, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, has findings earlier that says that they have tried to provide an intervention, the charter was not successful, and the charter should be closed. If that happens, it is not appealed.
That's a new note.
Yeah, and that's an ed code. It's your fun fact for the day.
We needed that 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the CCE was involved because that was a new charter. They would. Okay, and then for the renewal piece, there is now a tiered pathway there for renewal. So you can have and this is where we'll be living soon. There's a 5 to 7 year renewal, and it's based upon performance, a 5-year renewal, or a short-term 2-year renewal, or just a denial completely. And then within this policy, there's all the structured timelines and hearings and everything else related to that. And then lastly, and this is the last piece of bread, so this is our existing policy. If you'll notice in the notes, the only thing we did here was just pull out the information related to denials, appeals, and monitoring and put those into those 3 policies that are standalone. So there's no real change here except remove and reorganize. So that is your board policy related to charter sandwich, if you will. You should know that this is all grounded in CSBA language, best practices, and we've just personalized it as we always do. And this is your first reading. Recommendations to move to second reading, which will happen on June 9th.
Questions?
Yes.
So John.
Yes, I'm just curious, with other board policies we've recently seen, we had an ad hoc committee that actually read through everything and commented, and so there was board input. And since this one hasn't been done the same way, so is there something special about this, or was it considered? I don't understand the difference in process.
Yeah, and the difference in process is before we were looking at the complete package, we put the appellate review to the side. And then once we were done with the complete review of all of our policies minus the appellate review, we dissolved that ad hoc committee because per our bylaws, we could not continue that work because that work had continued that committee because that work had ended. So we're just now pulling out certain things that need to be reviewed and go in front of this board. It's no longer a big package, it's just policy by policy, and this is just one policy that's coming forward. In the fall, we're going to be bringing just to you some ed code revisions, and it'll be policy by policy.
This
Those
is a
are
huge
the-
amount of work. Who worked on it?
It was a team effort as always.
No, it's great. It's just so much work.
Yeah, well, we have a great team that loves to get into this.
You know, it's interesting that it was only mentioned there's only 2 charters now in the county, but at one time there were many more were there, right? Because there 4 was the one, we have Oracle here.
We have.
And then Willow Creek. Willow Creek.
Yeah.
Oracle.
And what about MCAT? Was that wasn't charter, that was more public.
So we had 4 was the max the county has ever done. Okay.
Phoenix, and then also.
Yes, the Phoenix. And some we manage or some the districts manage.
Authorized, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, authorized. They manage themselves.
I mean,
they
oversee-
they
oversee.
do all that stuff. The board does.
All right, this is first reading. So we have questions. Any more questions? Do we have a motion to move it to the second reading next month? So
To do that.
is there a motion?
I'll move.
Okay, what about a second to make it a second reading? Okay, we got a second on a second reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, we'll get a second reading next month. Okay, now we're moving on to 5.03 resolution number 1092 LGBTQ and Pride Month. Now, we've been doing this for several years. This is who's going to present this, Dr. John Carroll.
Yes, and this is something that we've been doing for many years. And I wanted to make a comment. I usually give a little bit of a philosophical underpinning about this, but it's becoming a sort of like, oh, we do this every year, and I think that's great. Like the more this becomes rote and becomes not a big flashpoint, I think the better work we are doing to support all students. So I think it is worth calling attention to this issue because I think our LGBTQ plus students do continue, especially given the current political environment, do continue to suffer more than others in a lot of ways. So it's important that we make sure we call this out, but at the same time, I like the idea that this is just something that we do, and this isn't, we're not, doing something super special, that we're just supporting all kids, and that's what this is all about.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is there a special month for any other groups that the board
Oh, yeah.
supports? And what are the other groups in the other months?
Yeah, and I'm
that
not,
are done the same way where we vote on?
yeah, I'm not sure if actually I probably spoke too quickly, but we do recognition for a variety of there's every month is a month for something. I'm not sure if we have any others offhand that go to the board for a resolution.
I don't remember ever having one come to the board for
Yeah.
approval.
Employee appreciation, this one.
This one? Yeah, other than this one. That's why I was wondering, why isn't this one in with the other group of months that are established that we don't vote on?
I mean, it's a priority. This is a
Good
priority
question.
board now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems that that's the way it's
What
going to
other
be.
groups are you interested in supporting in this way?
Well, I think that he's saying, I don't know which ones there are, but I understood him to say that's what I was asking. Are there
Black
others?
History Month.
Right, but I don't know that, I don't remember us ever doing anything about it. And therefore, that's why I don't know if it's like part of the repertoire and is already built in, and why is this one not built in? So I don't know, I'd like to have information as to whether there are other months that are approved for recognition. I just don't know that.
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, I can't think of any that the board approves, although we could certainly add to that if we wanted to.
Well, I'd like to just maybe let me know if all others that are considered.
I thought part of the reason this was resolution was also related to the flag that's hanging out front.
Yeah, and I think we'd have to go back in history a little bit to see how this came out. And it might have been that a previous board had wanted to make a more overt statement by having a resolution. I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm not sure that was the case. It's been going on since what, 2018 or something.
I'd just like to know the history and if there are other groups that we may feel are appropriate to provide the same sort of recognition for.
Okay, interesting question. Okay, any other questions or comments? Yeah, this is a roll call vote. So Superintendent Carroll.
Lido Pan,
Yes.
Cindy Johansson.
Yes.
Wait, okay, I'm sorry, I know we didn't have a motion.
Okay.
We know we're gonna, is there a motion on the,
I move.
okay,
A second?
okay, no, let's have a roll call. Anybody? Turn,
Sorry for jumping the gun. Lido Pan, Cindy Johansson,
Yes.
Nancy McCarthy,
Yes.
Marilyn Nemser,
Yes.
Curtis Robinson,
yes.
Jill Sartori.
Yes.
Okay, all right, and it's another unanimous vote today. We're all on the same page. That motion, that resolution is approved for publication. Now number 6, Marin County Board of Education reports. And we have a few different reports, so we're gonna try to find a little list of who's doing what. So clear, let's start with efficiency and effectiveness collaborative E2 board members appointed our Vice President Del Pan and Trustee Member McCarthy. Any comments?
Council McCarthy has a comment, no, she will read it.
The efficiency and effectiveness group will meet tomorrow. And at the meeting, they'll hear the updates on the countywide middle school athletic program. And then engage in planning related to the 26-27 U2 meeting. The conclusion of the meeting, the 26-27 U2 meeting topics and meeting calendar will be set. So all members are invited to put forward topics that they believe should be discussed for collaboration.
Thank you. You know, this whole issue of building Medi-Cal and private insurance, we talked about this a few years ago, and there was a lot of inefficiencies on the table there, and probably there is a lot of lost revenue. So, you know, a county-wide thing like that would be appropriate. Having said that, billing insurance companies and Medicaid, it takes a lot of work and a lot of money, and it's not so easy. So, you know, to undertake something like that would be a big investment, but there could be a big return. Just a heads up as you guys think more about this and as the efficiency investors.
But I intended to suggest as a topic.
Perfect, thank you. And now, any other comments on efficiency and effectiveness collaborative? Seeing none, let's move on to the Joint Legislative Advisory Committee, JLAC, and that's Trustee Sartori.
Thank you, and greetings from Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh boy, time to be there.
It's the only thing that's standing in between me and dancing at Luke Bryan's bar tonight. Okay, we have a meeting on May 7th, so I wanted to provide an update on a few things that came up. The first is the environmental remediation update. The site requires some cleanup. It was formerly used as a firing range when it was part of the San Quentin Rehabilitation Center. So the state's Department of Toxic Substances Control is overseeing that process. And at the meeting, we talked about the fact that the Department of Toxic Substances had asked for additional soil sampling beyond what had already been done. And that additional work is expected to happen within the next month. And because of that extra time, now the overall remediation timeline is being pushed back by about 60 days. The cleanup plan, which is called the Removal Action Work Plan, or RAW, is now expected to go out for public reviews between July and mid-August. So the good news is that despite this delay, the developer still expects construction to begin in the fall of 2026.
The second item is about construction sequencing. Eden Housing, which is the partner developer building the low income family units, has a deadline in fall of 2026 to close on its tax credit financing. And if they miss that window, those tax credits go away. So the board was asked to authorize staff to explore a strategy where Eden Housing would step in to manage and build the early shared site work like grading and foundation through their own financing, while the JPA would continue working through the environmental process and finalize its own financing plan. So this is just an exploratory authorization. There hasn't been any money committed, no contracts have been signed. So stay tuned, that will be coming back in a future report. And then the third item is about bond financing. The board also considered authorizing an agreement with S&P Global Ratings to do a credit evaluation of the project's proposed financing. The cost for that is up to $35,000, and that money will come from the state budget funds that were secured for the project, so not out of the operating budget. So to sum it all up, Oakville is still on track. But there are a few complexities to navigate, including the environmental mediation, tax credit deadline, bond financing, and presenting a balanced budget. But there still is cautious optimism that the project will continue moving forward.
Great, thank you, Jill. Any questions for Jill? Okay, very nice presentation. Okay, moving on, the CSBA, that's Cindy Johansen. Moving on, CSBA.
Well, for CSBA, I just wanted to call out that board members may have seen in your county office email a CSBA action alert regarding concerns with the governor's proposed treatment of Proposition 998 funds in the 2026-27 state budget. Deputy Superintendent Lenz advised that Superintendent Carroll participate in the call for action. I also chose to participate as an individual board member. And for anyone interested, the link that John shared provides more information, and it takes only a few minutes.
Okay, and Cindy, do you want to talk about the ACC?
Yeah, I'm just going to spend the weekend in Ukiah with some other county board members from around the state. And I'll share back any insights that are relevant to this board at the next meeting.
Trustee McCarthy, you're also on that committee. Did you have any comments?
Yep.
Right, and also Marilyn for the MCSBA.
Yeah, well, I'm reminding everybody, May 21st is the Golden Bill. And we don't want to drop that. If you have not been there, you must attend because it's just very uplifting and it will make you so proud. And if you've been there before, you know it, so you want to go again. It's at Dominican and it starts at 4:30. 4:30. Okay. And I just also wanted to say, I see my flyer for Employee Appreciation Day is Thursday afternoon, and I'm not sure I'll be able to make it, so I just want to tell you all how much I appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay, any other board or committee reports, board functions? Seeing none, let's adjourn the meeting. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.